Good morning, scholars. I hope everyone is doing well at home, that you're staying safe, that you are working daily in your packets, and you're watching all of our videos in the 4th grade YouTube channel. Today, we're going to start with chapter number 6, Some Major Decisions. The objective of the day, scholars, is for us to summarize important decisions made at the start of the Constitutional Convention. In the next videos that we're going to be having and discussions like lesson 7, 8, and 9, and 10, we will see in more detail what happened in the Constitutional Convention. But today, we are going to focus at actions that happened at the beginning. So let's start. First things first, if you're working in your Do Now and you read the quote that I post for you that you have to write in your own words, I will give you this extra information for you to be able to respond to it. So first of all, the Virginia Plan was stated in 1787. It was stated by James Madison. He fought and he was a very important person aiming for independence from Great Britain, but he was also part of Virginia. So he felt himself more as a Virginian than an American, and he was one of the delegates participating in the Constitutional Convention. So in this Virginia Plan, he stated a couple things. First, he said that there should be a supreme power or a central government, a national government. That's number one. Number two, he divided the government into three branches: executive, judicial, and legislative. This is very important, scholars, because as we see in our country today, we have three branches of power. Power is divided in three, but we will talk more about that in further videos, in other videos. Also, he talked about representation. He talked about how people could participate in Congress. He said that legislature should be bicameral, that means two houses. If you recall, scholars, in America we have two houses. We have the Senate and we have the House of Representatives. So this is something that he was thinking before even decisions were made. So he said that the number of representatives of the legislature will depend on each state population. This, however, will benefit large states, giving them more representatives. For example, Virginia at this time had around 300,000 people in the state. However, Rhode Island had only around 30 to 60,000 people. So who will get more representation in Congress? Obviously Virginia, and Rhode Island will have less. So this was something, scholars, that smaller states were not liking. This is something that they really appreciate about the Virginia Plan, because it put the representation on jeopardy, because they will have less voice and less vote in the decisions. So now, after this quick recap, you can start doing your Do Now. If you are done with your Do Now, let's continue with our video. Okay, so chapter number 6. The main concept, scholars, that we're going to be exploring today is the Virginia Plan. Let's keep that in mind. Yesterday was Constitutional Convention. The days before was the Articles of Confederation. But today is the Virginia Plan. Let's remember, scholars, what was happening before the start of the Constitutional Convention. Let's remember that it took place in Philadelphia in May 8, 1787. Let's remember that this building that we have on our right, it's called Independence Hall. But before, it was the Philadelphia State House, was where people before in Philadelphia met to work on legislative decisions, making laws. And on the right, or how you're seeing it, the green room is a representation, scholars, of how representatives were seated during these summer days, because May is basically almost summer, during these summer days, talking about decisions that will impact all states. and in the end will impact you and me, well, in certain way. So let's see that in this image we can see the quill pens, we can see some ink, we see candles because they didn't have electricity back then, so everything has to be light out with candles. And one funny, interesting information is that because they were having these discussions during summertime, there's a lot of sunlight. So there was less need for them to turn candles on. But this also meant that there was longer days of work. Why? Because if you're seeing the sunlight out, you keep working, and probably there was no watches around or anyone had a watch in their wrist, and maybe they stopped working when the sun set, and during summertime sunset is around 8:30 to 9 p.m. So these were long days of work and debate, scholars. Also, let's remember that why this constitutional convention was important. It was important, scholars, because they want to create a better central government to govern with real power. Let's remember that the Articles of Confederation create a central government, but it was weak. It was all dependent on the states for their will and to have any money or resources or soldiers. So this was not optimal for the 13 colonies. And also, as we have seen in the video that I posted yesterday, there was a risk, scholars. There was a real risk that if the 13 colonies could not agree on a central government, they will divide, they will separate, and probably they will create their own country. Or maybe they will even ask for the King of England to come back and rule them. So this was a very serious situation. That's why all states took this very serious and sent their best delegates to the Constitutional Convention. Also, let's recall, scholars, that the Constitutional Convention had 55 delegates from the 13 colonies. A quick data point is that by the end, in September of the Constitutional Convention, only 35 delegates remained in Philadelphia. A lot of people left. A lot of people leave. And why did they leave? Because maybe they didn't agree on the decisions that were made, so they left. Also, let's recall that, as I said in my previous slide, they want to review the Articles of Confederation or produce a new form of central government. So, having this in mind, scholars, let's talk about a couple details that happen in this part of the discussion, and that will help you with question number 1 in your packet. So, the first things first is that discussions at the Constitutional Convention will keep secret. That means that they didn't want anyone outside knowing what was happening. Imagine if you are from a state, you are a representative, you're a delegate, and you are saying, okay, I think the states should have less power and we should create a strong central government. And people hear about that position that you're making, and the news go to your state, let's say New York, and then you start receiving letters from people in your state saying, no, we don't want that. You are going against the will of our state. Will you feel confident to continue discussing? No, you will feel that your opinion will be linked to people outside the building. So that's why they said we need discussions and everything that we're talking to keep it secret. Also, they have to choose a president of the convention. I'll talk a little bit more about that in our next slide. Also, they want people to be free to speak their mind. They don't want people to be thinking about what others will think. They just want them to be open and respect, obviously, each other's words and present their best points of view. So this is very important, scholars, that you will have for question number 1. This is part number 1 of your answer for question number 1. For question number 2, scholars, for question number 1, part 2, we also have that there was critical decisions in the Constitutional Convention. The future of the 13 states was at stake. Government need to change or the independence could be at risk. As I said before, states were starting to get fighty against each other. Some people were starting to think about, like, why don't we call again the King of England? We were better with him. There was rules, there was order. Maybe this Republican republic government that we are trying to create, maybe this is not for us. So this was very important, scholars. That's why everyone had to take it very serious to participate in the 13, to participate in the Constitutional Convention. And for question number one, the second part of your answer, scholars, George Washington. As we have seen before, he was the general leading the Continental Army, to lead the army against Great Britain. He was the amazing general that helped the colonies to gain their independence. So everyone in 13 states highly respect him. He was very much admired and people had the uttermost respect for him. So having George Washington there is very important. It's very important because he's telling people in the States, hey, if I can be there and think about our government or the future of our government, it's because this is very important, not only for me, but for everyone and the future of the Union. So the second decision for question number one, scholars, was that he was elected chairman of the convention. We can see it here in the image. He was going to be the person trying to keep sense and organization of the discussions. He was going to be the chairman, the president, which make order on people time to talk. And on the other hand, scholars, he also recognized the need for a stronger central government. George Washington, after Shays' Rebellion in Massachusetts, he realized that we really need a stronger government in the 13 states. This situation could not happen, and this was putting everyone in jeopardy. Okay, so now, scholars, let's take our readers. If you have your reader, let's take it. Let's go to chapter number 6, some major decisions. If you don't have your reader at hand, please make sure that you are following the reader as my reading, as there's some fill out the blank that you need to complete. So let's begin. Chapter 6, page 44. Some major decisions. A need for secrecy. Right at the start, the delegates made two important decisions. The first was choosing George Washington as chairman of the convention. That was an easy decision. Washington was everyone's first choice. The second decision was to keep all discussions secret. That way, each person could express his ideas freely. He could even change his mind about an issue without having to face public disapproval. The delegates will not have to worry about the newspapers or citizens looking over their shoulders and criticizing this or that proposal. Instead, the convention will present its final plan to the people and say, this is the result of our best efforts. Now it is for you, the people, to say yes or no. Such secrecy meant not only closed doors, but closed windows. The summer of 1787 was Philadelphia's hottest in nearly 40 years. Parentheses. Can you imagine, scholars? In 40 years, that was the hottest summer. So that means they had no AC and the windows are closed. And if you recall, if you see page 45, that's the clothes that they are using. So they are very sweaty and exhausted from the heat, but they are going because they know this is important for the future of the Republic. So let's continue. Closing parentheses, let's continue. Page 44. With not a breath of fresh air, the hot and sticking room Delegates sweater in the miserable heat. Mosquitoes beat right through the delegates' clothing, and big blue butterflies dance around their head. It was a wonder the uncomfortable delegates could concentrate on their work. Let's go to page 46. If the meetings were so secret, how do we know what they say there? We owe that to several delegates who took notes, especially James Madison. Madison chose a seat at the very front where he could plainly hear every delegate. I was not absent a single day, so he has perfect attendance. Madison wrote later, nor more than a fraction of any hour in any day. Using his own system of abbreviation and symbols, he wrote down in a private journal nearly everything that went on in the secret meetings. We know from Madison's notes that he himself addressed the convention no fewer than 161 times. Clearly, the quiet, soft-spoken Madison had a lot to say. But then, no one had thought about what constitution-making than he had. With the decision about secrecy made, the delegates turned to business that brought them to Philadelphia. The business was to decide the kind of central government the United States of America should have. The Virginia Plan. Edmund Rudolph of Virginia asked to speak first. As governor of the state, Randolph headed the Virginia delegation. It was his job to present his ideas, the ideas that Madison and others had been working on. These ideas came to be called the Virginia Plan. The Virginia delegation, Randolph told the convention, will offer some proposals shortly, but first, he said, it might be useful to talk generally about the things the central government should be able to do. A central government, said Rudolph, should provide for the common defense. That means it should be able to protect the American people against foreign enemies. The delegates listened thoughtfully. No argument there. Parenthesis. Let's remember, scholar, that at this time there was no national army. There was no national navy. There was only armies in each state trying to keep things together in their own territory. If things were happening in New York, well, New York should deal with that. Virginia not going to support them now. That's not what happened during the independence. To remember that the 13 colonies fought together. So this is a very interesting point that he stated. Let's have a national army. Let's continue page 47. It should protect the liberties of the American people, continued Randolph. The delegates continued to listen. No argument there either. It should be able to make laws about trade between states so that the states will not be taxing each other's citizens. Again, the delegates agree. No argument about that. It should provide for the general welfare of the people. That meant doing things for the good of the people and not just the people of one state or another. Once again, no disagreement from anyone. But Randolph continued. Under the Articles of Confederation, the central government could not do these things. To do them, a government will need the power to raise an army without having to beg for soldiers. It will need the power to collect its own taxes without having to beg the states for money. And it will need many more powers beside. Randolph then described what the new government might look like. You will be reading about that shortly. So scholars, this will help you for question number 3 on our packet. Powers the central government should have. Number 1, protect the people against enemies. Number 2, protect the liberties of its citizens. Number 3, control the trade between states. Number 4, provide for the good of all the people. Number 5, raise money through some form of taxation. Let's continue, page 48. By the end of the day, few delegates were becoming uncomfortable. Yes, they said. The Virginians were probably right, but where was Randolph's argument leading? Randolph did not let them wonder long. The next day he spoke again. The next day, the Virginia delegation, he said, believed that the central government should be able to deal directly with the people, instead of depending on the kindness of the state governments. In certain areas, it must have power higher than those of the states. In those areas, the central government must have supreme powers. A strong central government? But wait! Wasn't the whole idea of the Articles of Confederation that the states had supreme power? Yes, it was. Now, here was Governor Rudolph saying that we need a national government that will be supreme over the states in some areas. That last statement of Rudolph was met by a long silence. Remember, scholars had called the convention to revise the Articles of Confederation, not to throw them out. Page 49. In the every first week of the convention, the Virginia delegation was asking the convention to do that. When discussion finally began, it was long and sometimes heated. After a time, the delegates put aside this difficult issue to discuss other parts of the Virginia plan, but the issue had been raised, and it remains in the minds of all. On June 15, William Peterson of New Jersey introduced an alternative plan to the Virginia plan. His plan, which became known as the New Jersey Plan or the Small State Plan, called for adding amendments to the articles instead of replacing them. The next day, Edmund R. Randolph argued that amending the articles will not fix its problem. The delegates did not meet the next day, Sunday. On Monday, when they meet again, Alexander Hamilton gave a long speech calling for an even more powerful national government than the Virginia Plan did. On June 19, after a long speech by Madison, the convention made the big decision to write a new constitution that will create a new, stronger central government for the United States of America. They will not attempt to amend the Articles of Confederation. So scholars, as we have seen in this video, they realized after 3 weeks of debates, because they start at the end of May, that the Articles of Confederation need to be redo. They cannot continue adding amendments. They cannot be working with them. They are not good for the Union. They are not providing what is required. And they are going to work on the new American Constitution. This is amazing, scholars, because finally people from 13 states, 55 people from 13 states realize that they need a new form of government. Now, on the other hand, is, okay, what powers are we going to really give to the central government, and what articles are we going to add in this new Constitution? So for that, we're going to be talking that in our next videos. Let's have a quick review of the Virginia Plan, scholars. It proposed 3 branches of government: the executive power, head of president, 2 House legislature, the Senate and House of Representatives, and judiciary, on head of the Supreme Court. Let's recall, scholars, that each branch will serve as a check on the powers of others. It means that the executive power will have some power to check the other 2, and the judiciary against the legislative and executive, and so on. In that way, they are creating a system of checks and balances. So no one has so much power that can undermine liberties, freedom, pursuit of happiness, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and could really affect Americans' way of life and decision-making processes. And it also recommended that the states be represented in Congress based upon their population numbers. In Monday's video, scholars, I will touch base a little bit more about what does it mean, what was the compromise that they reached, because let's remember there's big states like Virginia with a lot of population and small states like Rhode Island with fewer population, and they both want to have some kind of equal representation. Before we end, let's don't forget, scholars, to review the following video, The Revolution Becoming a Nation. I am leaving the video, link to the video in the description. Start watching the video from minute 32:39. Minute 32, second 39. This is a very interesting video. I really like it. And I think you will like it too. If you want, you can start always watching first the video and then look in my YouTube video. It's how it better works for you, scholars, to make sure you are watching it, as there is a lot of useful information, and History Channel did a great job putting this video together. So, scholars, that will be the end of our video. Please review the reader or video to complete your packet for today. And please remember to don't hesitate to contact me if you have any questions. I hope all of you are having a wonderful day, a wonderful time at home. I miss you so much. I miss being in class with you, listening to your brilliant and amazing ideas, listening to your details and how you're learning so much. So hopefully we can be back in class soon. But in the meantime, have a wonderful day, scholars, and see you on Monday in our daily YouTube video. Thank you so much, scholars. Have a good one. Bye-bye.